Okay, so today I'm going to tell you about some of the coolest, smoothest, most effective criminals that you've probably never heard of, despite the fact that there are a lot of members. They are responsible for what are known as some of the most glamorous heists in history. They are transnational, they are all genders, and they are, for lack of a better term, absolutely fabulous. Today, we talk about the Pink Panthers. Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. The Pink Panther is a fictional character often associated with a series of comedy mystery films featuring a charming yet somewhat inept French police detective, Inspector Jacques Clouseau. The character of the Pink Panther also appeared in animated cartoons. The character's popularity led to a series of theatrical shorts, TV shows, and obviously merchandise. And our crime today features our very own real-life Pink Panthers. So to toast them, we're going completely on brand with the Pink Panther cocktail. To make this pretty drink, add the following things to a shaker with ice. 2 parts white rum, 1 part peach liqueur, 1 part strawberry liqueur, and 1 part cream of coconut. Shake until chilled and combined, and then strain over fresh ice. Add grenadine to make the drink as pink as your heart's desire. For the mocktail version, take 2 parts rum syrup, 1 part peach juice, and 1 part cream of coconut, and add to the ice-filled shaker. Shake and shake, strain, and top with strawberry soda. You can also add grenadine if you need to make it more pink, but I think it'll pretty much look perfect as is. Just a warning, this mocktail is very sweet. Predrag Vjosevic was a man built like an acrobat. He was raised in Biala, a fishing village in Montenegro, and he was in his late 20s. He stood around 5 feet 8 inches tall and had a small waist but big hulking arms. He arrived in London during the first week of May in 2003. A week later, Nebojša Denik, a Serbian living in Zurich and working as a custodian in a Swiss hospital, flew in to meet Predrag. They met up in Isleworth in West London and bought a used Vespa Piaggio motor scooter. Both men happened to be members of one of the most inventive and elusive gangs of jewel thieves to ever exist. Their name? The Pink Panthers. On the morning of May 19th, 2003, Predrag strolled along New Bond Street in London. He stopped outside of the cellar of the most fabulous diamonds and jewels in the world, Graf. He looked inside the windows at the storefront for around 5 minutes, speaking to no one and not going inside, and turned to walk away. Just before noon the next day, Predrag and Nebojša walked in the door at Graf and in less than 3 minutes managed to snag more than $30 million worth of diamonds in what would be, at the time at least, the biggest jewel heist in British history. Nebojša went into the store first, wearing a suit and carrying an umbrella. He was also wearing a very obvious Elvis-style pompadour wig, but this didn't ring any alarm bells for the clerks. At Graf, they're used to dealing with the rich and famous, who were sometimes known to enter the store in disguise. He asked to look at a $450,000 12-carat diamond ring, but upon inspecting it said, quote, "It's too glamorous. Do you have a smaller one?" End quote. Before the employees had a chance to get him a slightly less glamorous ring, Nebojša pulled out a chrome-plated .357 Magnum, yelling, quote, "Everyone on the floor," end quote. Predrag, who had just strolled into Graf, smashed open display cases with a hammer, pulled out a bag, and scooped up 47 pieces of diamond jewelry. Before anyone really knew what was happening, both men ran out the front door, seemingly running in opposite directions. A security guard immediately pursued Nebojša and caught up to him. They started to wrestle with the gun, and it went off, sending a bullet ricocheting off an air conditioner and grazing the nose of a woman just taking a stroll on New Bond Street. The guard managed to subdue Nebojša by, get this, sitting on him. And when Steve Alexander, a detective from Scotland Yard, arrived, he said that Nebojša, quote, "was very smartly dressed, but with a ridiculous wig. It looked like a cat was lying on his head," end quote. An investigation was launched, obviously, and within days, Scotland Yard identified another accomplice, Milan Jovic, who had been in charge of making the travel arrangements for the heist. During the search of their apartment, or as the British like to call it, flat, investigators discovered 2 fake Italian passports with no names or photographs in them. And, by happenstance, a detective picked up a jar of face cream from the bathroom. For some reason, he stuck his finger in the jar and swirled it around, discovering something hard. When he pulled it out, it was a blue diamond ring from, you guessed it, Graf. It was worth $750,000. Good thing housekeeping didn't just throw that jar away accidentally. It was upon learning that fact about the crime that the Daily Mail and other newspapers, as well as eventually Interpol, started calling the robbers the Pink Panthers. Why? Well, a similar ruse was used in the 1975 comedy The Return of the Pink Panther. Clever. But while they'd found 1 ring, a lot was still missing. And so was Predrag. The detectives managed to use Milan's phone records to track down an apartment in Paris where Predrag had been staying, but when they arrived, shockingly, he was not there. However, Scotland Yard detectives also used that time to compare notes with their Parisian counterparts, where they came to the conclusion that well-dressed criminals with strong Eastern European accents had pulled off some 20 robberies similar to the Graf heist, all over the continent, from Geneva to Amsterdam to Paris and London and back again. Turns out there were a lot of Pink Panthers out there. After months of searching, detectives were finally able to intercept Predrag as he was driving into France from Italy. The interrogation went nowhere. They were no closer to discovering more about who those Pink Panthers were working for or where the jewels had gone. And while the Graf crime may have been their first highly covered crime in the media, it certainly wouldn't be their last, or their biggest. It would be followed by dozens of other heists attributed to the Pink Panthers. In March of 2004, 2 Serbian Pink Panthers walked into a jewelry store wearing dumb wigs and immobilized a guard with pepper spray. They took the necklace they had been looking at, which had naturally a 125-carat diamond in it. I looked at how big a diamond that size would be, and I'd like to say it's like the width of the average palm. That even I would think is too much. I don't even wear jewelry. Anyway, also in March 2004, a Maki boutique in Tokyo was robbed by 2 men wearing wigs, beige coats, and brown leather gloves. They pepper sprayed the clerk and grabbed a necklace worth $33 million. Also in 2004, the wife of the Prime Minister of France was visiting a jewelry store named Chopard, and the Pink Panthers snagged $14 million worth of jewels from an unguarded display case, since all the clerks were a little distracted helping the Prime Minister's wife. The next year, some Pink Panthers got all dolled up in floral print shirts and heisted a jewelry store in Saint-Tropez, a town in southern France, in the middle of broad daylight. After stealing the jewels, they ran down to the nearby harbor and escaped in a speedboat. Yes, another speedboat heist. On April 15, 2007, in Dubai, the Pink Panthers drove through the gated entrance of a mall in 2 Audi sedans. Then one of the Audis smashed into the front of the jewelry store, driving in reverse, mind you. The driver honked twice, and 3 masked men grabbed jewels and ran, jumping into their now getaway Audis, which were prepped and ready to go since they were facing the right direction. They managed to take with them jewelry worth $3.4 million. The entire heist took 170 seconds. In December 2008, 4 Pink Panthers dressed themselves up as women before breaking into Harry Winston Jewelers in Paris. The gang escaped from the store with items worth over $100 million. It's possible their most infamous heist was in 2016, when some people, maybe Pink Panthers, stole $5.6 million worth of jewelry in Paris from Kimberly Kardashian herself. That included her 20-carat diamond engagement ring from Kanye West. Unable to make real headway on the numerous crimes, detectives in Brussels, Geneva, Tokyo, London, and Paris began to compare notes as well as evidence, including fingerprints, DNA, and phone numbers. They have managed to imprison around 24 Pink Panthers, but the gang continued to operate, or did until at least 2016. Much about the Pink Panthers operation remains a mystery, which I'm guessing is their aim. Most of the jewels, except the one covered in face cream, also remain at large, which I'm guessing is also their aim. In the realm of infamous Panthers, Dragoon Mikic, a rugged Belgrade native, stands out. During the tumultuous period of conflict in Bosnia and Kosovo, he deftly sidestepped military service in the Serbian army, opting instead for a career in crime. He was a part of several heists in France, and then on January 31st, 2003, he and 2 accomplices brazenly robbed Du, a jewelry store in the French ski resort town of Courchevel, making off with a dazzling haul valued at $500,000. Dragoon's luck ran out the next day in Albertville, a neighboring Alpine town. His attempt to purchase a train ticket with a €500 note raised suspicions, leading to his arrest. Surveillance footage captured Dragoon leaving a large bag on the platform, which contained the stolen jewels along with 2 canisters of tear gas and a Serbian passport bearing the name Milan Kilibarda. As he languished in jail, his imposing physique and menacing aura did not escape the notice of local prosecutor Gilbert Lefay. Gilbert recalled Dragoon giving him a little smile and would say, quote, "These guys don't care about being put into jail. They know they are going to escape," end quote. And escape they do. Dragoon himself escaped for the first time from a guard on November 17, 2003, but was quickly recaptured, and they put him in a more secure prison. On a fateful afternoon in 2005, the scene outside the prison was straight out of an action movie. 2 men arrived in a white truck, its cargo bed loaded with 3 ladders. With swift precision, one of them leaned a ladder against the towering prison wall and climbed, firing a gun at the guard tower. Meanwhile, his accomplice flung another ladder and a pair of wire cutters over the wall to Dragoon, who was ready for his escape. Dragoon quickly cut the roll of barbed wire encircling the prison yard, scaled the wall, and climbed down to freedom using the strategically placed 3rd ladder. Since that daring escape, Dragoon has never been seen again. And he's not the only one. Several Pink Panthers have escaped from Swiss prisons, and on July 12, 2012, one Pink Panther escaped from prison in Athens, Greece, when a man who entered the prison pretending to deliver art supplies cold-cocked a guard and stole her keys. Arguably, the detective who knows the most about this gang of thieves is Belgian Andre Notre Dame, a gray-haired man with a doughy face and a handlebar mustache, because of course, he has a handlebar mustache. He theorizes that the core of the Pink Panther operation was between 20 and 30 experienced thieves, with dozens of other logistical assistants. The full network has been estimated at between 200 and 220 people. Many of the thieves are ex-soldiers with military and paramilitary backgrounds. Both men and women play an equal part in the structure of the organization. According to Mike, no last name, quote, "Women in the Panthers have to be exceptional. We have very high requirements of them because they have the leading roles, but you can only have one in each gang. She has to be intelligent, she has to be beautiful, and she has to love money very much," end quote. Another associate, Leela, no last name, agreed, saying, quote, "Not anyone can do this job. You must be born to do it. The guys do the majority of the job, but they need a woman on their team. Without a woman, nothing could be done," end quote. That probably applies for a lot of things. Pink Panther groups are based in countries like Italy, France, Belgium, Holland, and Switzerland. Thieves often return home to Montenegro or Serbia, where they are on call for future jobs. And where does the jewelry go? Well, it's sold to wealthy clients in France, Italy, Switzerland, and Russia that want a deal on some diamonds, most likely. And the money? Detective Andres says, quote, "Some of the money winds up in Serbia. The Serbian authorities like money investments," end quote. And what doesn't go to the authorities is laundered in Serbia and then invested into businesses and real estate. And if a Pink Panther ends up arrested, it might actually be because their boss Panther turned them in. They got to keep the workforce slim and got to keep the police heat down. Who are the boss Panthers? No one knows. According to Boris, no last name, they are a loosely organized group with logistical support across Europe. He would say, quote, "There is no brain. They think together," end quote. David Samuels wrote a lengthy article for The New Yorker, which I will, of course, link in the description box below. He managed to snag an interview with an anonymous, naturally, Pink Panther from Serbia. He would say, quote, "We grew up together. We all come from normal families. Our parents are normal people. They are not in this kind of life," end quote. The Panthers had gone to Italy and had seen how the other half lived, and they wanted a piece of that pie, apparently. And according to Novak, no last name, there are, quote, "no victims to what we do. We scare people, but we do not hurt them. We only take expensive things from rich people," end quote. And I guess, except for the pepper spray, he's right. No one has been seriously hurt in the estimated 341 jewelry heists that the Pink Panthers have pulled off. Most of these heists follow the same general pattern. Most high-end jewelry boutiques will only allow one person in at a time. So one well-dressed man will walk in by himself and then prop the door open with a piece of wood. Then a few of his associates will enter. The first man will pull out a gun while the others whip out hammers and pickaxes. They smash and grab very quickly and then stuff their treasures into bags. They drive off in a stolen vehicle. According to Detective Andre, quote, "They're all old cars, 10 years old," end quote. Why? Easier to hotwire and less noticeable on the road. Despite the old cars, the Pink Panthers are responsible for what have been termed some of the most glamorous heists in history, with one criminologist even describing their crimes as artistry. Many of these guys and gals have gotten away with millions and millions of dollars worth of jewels. In fact, authorities say that the Pink Panthers are responsible for anywhere between $500 million and $1.5 billion in stolen jewels across 35 countries. And while some have been caught and have served or are serving time for their crimes, many more have just vanished into the wind. But they're able to buy a sailboat for all that wind, or a couple of sailboats. Their crimes have been described as some of the most audacious in the history of organized crime, and at least one news source called them the world's best diamond thieves. Judging by the success and rate of capturing and keeping these people in prison, I'd probably have to agree. The Pink Panthers themselves have been described as inventive and desperate. Maybe no longer desperate for money, but like Gerald Blanchard and other CNC criminals before them, desperate for the adrenaline of the heist. Thanks for hanging out with me. There are a lot of really cool sources from this episode, including a documentary called Smash and Grab, which is streamable in many places for free. They interviewed a lot of Panthers themselves, and it's pretty cool. I highly recommend it. Everything, as always, is linked in the description box below. We always cite our sources on capers and cocktails. Next week, we have a silly little story that won't be as big of a commitment for your ears as this week was, and one of the most classic and famous cocktails that exist. If you want to know what I'm talking about, you'll just have to tune in then. Speaking of which, I'll see you next week, and remember, there are always alternatives to being part of the coolest named diamond heisting gang in history.